Hi, this is Black Cat Crafts. Our channel is going to cover this today. It is a homemade fountain, and not just any fountain. It's the one in The Nightmare Before Christmas in Halloween Town. I made this with EL wire. If you follow the channel, you'll know that I do a lot with LEDs. In this case, I tried something new. I wanted that real glowing look, both, coming down the fountain, but also inside. And it's hard to get that look with LEDs. So I use this instead. It's called EL wire, and as you can see, it's really uniform, very flexible, and totally fun to use. Perfect for our Halloween village. So I've actually got a couple of projects planned for the other colors that I have, but I started with the green. Now, this Nightmare Before Christmas fountain, I actually started it during COVID. If you are a big fan of Halloween villages, you'll know that Department 56 has a line of Nightmare Before Christmas, and the fountain is one of them. During COVID, I don't know if it was supply chain issues or what, but they weren't being sold. You could find them on eBay for about $200 a piece or more, and I knew I could craft my own. So that's what our video is about today, is about how to use EL wire and how I made this particular fountain out of a pot, a little wooden pot I got at the dollar store, air dry clay, a little bit of wire, and of course my glowing EL wire. So thanks for stopping by, and I hope you like the video. Black Cat Crafts, the channel that helps you personalize your Halloween village. We'll go through the steps necessary to create this fountain from the Nightmare Before Christmas movie by Tim Burton. We'll use EL wire, air dry clay, and a few other parts that you'll have, like aluminum foil, a little bit of wax paper, a planter from the dollar store, and some floral wire to make this project. So for the first step, grab your aluminum foil and the base or the pot that this fountain will go in. Keep in mind that the pot will be deep enough to hold the fake water, the EL wire. Also needs to be sturdy. This one happens to be wood, and so it's heavy. This project will be full of wire and air dry clay, all things that are heavy themselves, so we'll have to keep the balance of this project in mind as you craft it. On screen, I am folding aluminum foil. It's not a whole lot. My goal is to create a reflective base for the EL wire and also to raise up the EL wire. I didn't want it deep in the pot. I wanted it to be near the top so I could get the benefit of the light, and I really wanted it to shine very brightly. So I added just enough foil in there to allow me to put the sculpture inside, and also, as you can see, I'm just dry fitting the EL wire to make sure that I've got it just right. Later on in the project, I will be drilling a hole in the pot for the final project. We want to make sure that it looks fantastic. Now, to help you see the EL wire, I've got it on a flash mode. That won't be for the final project, but it really demonstrated for the video what the project will look like lit up. Step 2, let's start making the actual sculpture. I'm starting at the bottom, and that is an inverted cone. If you remember the movie, the statue itself is actually lifted above the water with an inverted cone shape. Almost kind of looks like a mushed witch's hat. Might have been purposeful, part of the overall design. So go ahead and grab a lump of your air dry clay and then form it into roughly that shape. At this time, I'm doing a little bit of finesse. I wanted the bottom to be flat, but again, this is a very free-form, flowing, designed not to be balanced, designed to be off-center. So the great part about doing this particular project, besides me throwing it on the floor there, is that you aren't required to be perfect. There's no symmetry here. So continue to flatten your piece and get it just like you like it, and then we'll move on to the next step. Step 3, we'll start to decorate that base. So I've got a tool, you could probably use a toothpick if you don't do a lot of work in clay, and I'm drawing the lines into the base. If you don't want to do this step, I would think you'd be able to get the effect after you paint it. We're going to paint this dark gray, so you could use black to paint on these lines if that's not something you want to do, again, with the texture in clay. So these lines are going to go not only coming up from the bottom of the base, but will also go on the flat portion. Before I carve those lines, I am making somewhat of a hollowed section of this. Again, if you reference, a picture of this or the movie itself, it wasn't flat. It actually kind of bent in. Again, almost looking like the center of a stylized witch's hat. So I've carved that out a little bit, and now I'm going to smooth it, and then I'm going to put in those lines. So for step 4, we're going to step away from actually doing the work with the clay, and we're going to make the armature instead. An armature, if you're not familiar with it, is a set of wires inside a clay project that helps support it. In this case, we have such a dramatic curve, a wonderful figure. We're definitely going to need the wire to be successful in this project. So earlier on, I mentioned that we wanted to select a base, in this case the wood pot, heavy enough to support the project. That's not all you're going to need to make sure this is successful. You'll also want to do what I'm doing here, and we're actually doing a set of supports. So I'm starting off with wire. I'm making a circle, and then I'm going to make cross pieces next to, again, not only secure the circle, but allow us to attach the whole piece, the fountain, the sculpture, to the center. So you'll see there, I'm taking my time wrapping it around. This is just an inexpensive dollar store floral wire, but it works out really well for this project because it's coated, it doesn't cut your fingers, and it's extremely flexible but easy to cut with my tools. So now I am going to drill out the center of the base of my fountain. Now this clay is still wet. I have not let it dry fully yet. Highly recommend doing this while it's still wet because my particular clay is pretty delicate. Not to say that a polymer clay might not, well, it could be more robust, but this I just knew would be successful. So I went ahead and, again, using a set of tools that I have, drilled out the center, and then now I am working with the wire to get it ready to poke through the center of that base. So there you have it. We've attached the base to the support for the fountain. That'll keep it really stable inside. It fits perfectly by design. Now that I'm satisfied with the base, I'm going to start forming the graceful curve of this statue, of this fountain. So the basic element is almost like a question mark or a letter C. So that's what I'm starting with. This is a very rough start. There will be a lot of adjustments as this project goes on. So now that we have the basic form attached to the base, we'll go ahead and add a little bit of extra wire to start making some of the additional body parts of the fountain. So I'm adding wire to the bottom. It's quite a bit, you won't need that much. But what I'm doing is I am making some support for the tail. So if you recall the movie This fountain has a little itty bitty squiggly tail at the bottom, and it's going to need some support. You could craft it totally out of clay, but it would be extremely fragile. And so doing exactly what I'm showing you there, attaching wire, and eventually I'll shape it and I'll cut it, will be a great support to have a slightly more durable piece. I think it's frustrating for everyone to have an awesome, Halloween decoration and then have it fall apart when you put it or into storage or take it out of storage. So this armature is a wonderful way to give anything you spend the time to craft some strength and some substance, so that way you can move it around with a little bit less fear of, oh my gosh, am I going to break this piece into smithereens and have to recraft it. So now that I'm satisfied that the base is strong, we'll go ahead and move on to step 5. In step 5, I've got an image of the inspiration on my phone, and I am continuing to add more wire to the project. We're going to need quite a bit to support the whole piece, and what I'm working on now are the arms. One point I want to just call out right now is that I've chosen to add the wings later. So you'll notice those are not included in this step. And I did that mostly because this piece is so intricate that I thought I'd be successful making those separate, making those later in the project, and then attaching them at the end. So I've doubled the wire here, and I am twisting it to the center piece very, very firmly so that it's secure. Now this doesn't have to be perfect because we're covering it with clay, and that's very, very forgiving. But the arms are very, very thin, so it's in your best interest to make them very even and very level. So you'll see that I'm continuing to work with the wire to get it to be stuck exactly where I want it. And then now my arms are roughly even in terms of height, of course not length. That will come next. Now that the arms are like I want them, let's start to work with their general shape. So I first pushed them out a little bit. We want to give our sculpture shoulders. And then after that, I'm figuring out exactly how long I want the arms to be, both above and below the creature's elbow. This doesn't have human proportions, so I made them actually roughly even. It was again, it's a fantasy project. You have so much leniency with how this looks. It's a great way to start if you are new to working with clay and armatures. All right, we've got a great start. It's not level just yet, but we'll do that in the future. So let's move on to the next step. In this step, we're going to go ahead and start forming the head. Attach a little wire to the top. what we'll do at this point is we'll form the top of the head, the top of the skull, and that will make a support for all the other parts of this creature, both the top of the mouth and then the bottom jaw. So while we're working on the head, I did bend the arms out of position to give me more room to work. It's just something you'll see me do from time to time in this video, is I'll make adjustments to the piece and then bend everything back for the final. Right now I am securing the head. This part is quite heavy, so I'm taking a little bit of extra wire to make that happen. Step 7. Let's start covering our piece with some air dry clay. I'm starting at the base with a small amount of clay, using, the basic techniques of taking a ball and rolling it into a snake. Once I get it roughly the thickness I'm looking for, I am going to use the good old-fashioned smash it on the wire technique to cover the wire and finish this part of the project. In this section, I am adding clay to that teeny tiny tail armature that we made earlier in the video. I'm definitely using non-traditional methods here, the jeweler's pliers, to smash that clay onto the wire. But it works great for this purpose. It gives me a lot of control. Just for something so tiny that it would be hard for my hands, my fingers to grip. Now that the tail is done and looking great, let's continue on putting more air dry clay on the rest of the sculpture's body. As you can see, I'm using a pair of pliers to hold the piece up. It's very heavy. So in this image, you see that I added a little bit of clay to the head. That just acts as a counterbalance to keep the whole thing upright. So choose to do that if it's a practical choice for you, as it was for me. It doesn't impact the overall outcome, just my sanity required this. So continuing on with the project, the air dry clay is still very wet, so I'm adding a little bit more to the overall body. The clay happens to be a white clay. It's going to get painted black later. So as long as the clay that you have can be painted, it doesn't matter what color it happens to be. So I'm getting the thickness of the fountain creature roughly correct. It is a little skinny on top, and I'll fix that later on. The goal of this part of the project is to get it, roughly the way I want it, in the right shape, where everything is lined up that needs to be lined up, right angles, and so on. So as the project goes on, I'm continuing to add clay, and it's really starting to come together. So the angles are a little off at this point, and that is because the piece is heavy. So I'm using those pliers again to help everything stay where it needs to be, upright, and I'm covering the arms with the clay. Now the angles are a bit off because of the weight of the clay. I will go ahead and bend the wire before the clay dries to make the overall fountain stand at the correct angles. If you don't have a lot of time, you could use a different type of clay. I would recommend a polymer clay. Polymer clay is wonderful because it doesn't dry when exposed to air. It needs heat to dry. So if you don't have the time to do a large project like this and need to break it up over several days, don't use an air dry clay. I would highly recommend any brand of the polymer clay. The wire is going to be very stable at the temperatures that the polymer clay is baked at, so it would be a great combination to use. So getting back to this, you can see I'm having a little mishap with one of the arms. The wire actually did break. So it is an inexpensive floral wire from the dollar store, but the fact that it broke wasn't a major problem for the arm, because the arm is attached both to the shoulder, but it is also holding the creature's neck. And so this wasn't something that required rework for me. I just needed to make sure it was nicely embedded in the clay before it dried. So you may be asking what I'm doing with this strange white clay. I did run out of my tan clay and using a white clay. This is for the purposes of this project, the clay color doesn't matter as long as it sticks together nicely because it's going to get painted. So I'm forming the bottom jaw of the creature. So it's not only flat, it's a little concave. So I am shaping it to have that rounded form, but also give me a ridge so I can carve teeth into it later. Those two sticks pointing out of the head, those are the wires that will support the bottom and the top jaw. So some of that will be pressed into the clay, and the rest of it I'll just either hot or super glue later on. So now that I have the bottom jaw the way I want it, I'm going to form the top jaw. These two will roughly match. So it's a great start to have the bottom jaw there first to get the overall size, then the shape, and then to go ahead and then match it with what I'm going to do for the top of the jaw, and then to finish out the head. As you can see, it's just fell over. It's really tippy at this stage, simply just because it is so top heavy. That can't be helped, and that set of pliers there is really, really helpful. Wow, this project is really coming along. It is starting to look like the movie. I'm so excited at this point. And there isn't all that much left to do. So the next step to get this really looking legit is I'm going to go back to elementary school and take a little chunk of clay and roll it out in a snake. That's one of the techniques you see me use a lot in all of my projects because it is back to basics, and in this case it really works well. We're going to roll out a rather long snake. Actually, it'll end up being several, because this piece will be added around the mouth to form the lips. So this particular statue has a very defined ridge around the mouth where the lips are stretched wide open. And you could definitely carve this, but for my skill level, it was easier to roll out a clay into the right diameter, snake, as I'm calling it, and I'll just wrap it on there and then affix it to the overall project. What I'm doing in this step is smoothing that snake into the head of the creature, but I'm also starting to form the shape of the head. So there's a ridge where the eyes pop out of the skull, so I'm forming that in there as well. But mostly focusing on making sure the lips are very firmly attached and integrated with the larger part of the sculpture. At this step in the process, I am adding indentations into the sculpture to form the eyes. So the eyes in this particular image in the movie, they were just little crescent slits. So easy to do. I'm using a clay tool. You could, again, use a toothpick or even a fingernail of the right size. Now that we have the outside of the mouth, we're going to work on the inside of the mouth. So I've rolled out some additional pieces of clay. These will become the teeth. This looks great. So once you've got everything ready to go, you can move on to step 8. In step 8, you're going to paint your sculpture black after it's either baked or air dried. You'll also paint your pot gray and drill a hole in the bottom where you want the back, the right size for that EL wire to fit through. So you'll only need a hole large enough for the wire itself. The cord in the battery box will stay outside, just like the rest of your Halloween Village accessories. So go ahead and pull that through, and then you'll start the rest of the assembly process. Now that you've got it in there, use a dab of hot glue to keep the wire from sliding out. So now we're ready to grab that aluminum foil from back at the beginning of the project and fit it in the bottom of the pot. We're doing this because it adds not only some required height for the sculpture to sit at the right level, but a nice reflective quality as well. My pot was a little deeper, so yours might not need as much foil to be at the right level. So once it's in like you like it and glued, we'll grab our fountain sculpture and we'll go ahead and glue that in as well. Now that our fountain is glued in, I am starting to add the EL wire to the bottom. My goal is to have the EL wire evenly dispersed around the bottom with just enough left at the end to feed from the bottom up into my sculpture's mouth. I will be affixing this with a little bit of hot glue, but before I do that, I'm doing a dry fit process to get it just the way I like it. I'm not sure at what temperature the plastic coating on my EL wire melts, so I'm trying to minimize how much hot glue touches the EL wire. Of course, some of it will, but I wanted to be very sensitive to this particular issue. And you'll see as I start to add hot glue that I go to one side and then go back to the different side and then back to the beginning to give the hot glue a chance to dry, so it's not as consistently hot. Again, thinking of the wire itself, the EL wire, not wanting to damage it for the overall project. So now that the EL wire is almost totally attached to the project, I'll just do some final finesse of the EL wire, get it glued into place, and then I'll start adding some small torn pieces of wax paper to the bottom. You can see actually in that image right there, the EL wire, it's a very consistent green, but it's definitely wire. You can see lines. So the goal of the wax paper is to diffuse the light, to hide the fact that it's wire, and to give the end product a consistent look. Now, if you're going to be using a really thick layer of hot glue, that naturally has a somewhat opaque quality to it, and you might not need to do the wax paper step, but for me, I wanted to minimize the hot glue, and so the wax paper was really, really helpful to get the look that I wanted in the end. Step 9 continues the process. We've put wax paper in the bottom, and now I'm going to put a little bit of wax paper, folded as you can see, on the part of the fountain that's coming out of the creature's mouth. Now that the wax paper is in place, I'm going to use hot glue to make the wax paper EL wire combination look more like water. So starting at the bottom, just adding drips of hot glue and dragging those drips up to fight gravity. So for the next step, step 10, I started off using a gloss paint to paint the texture on the fountain. So the fountain has scales, and I also rubbed some of the black paint into the crevices, into the eye, to really make it pop. But I honestly can't say I would recommend that unless you really love painting even small things. I didn't find this particular process all that appealing, although it looks really, really good. I think most people will have great success if you just use a black permanent marker. The fine tip one will work great. In fact, as I switch over to step 11, I did exactly that for the bricks on the bottom of the fountain. So the fountain from the movie has a brick look, and it's so much easier to do that with a marker rather than to sit there and paint everything. So big time recommendation. Don't make the mistake that I did. I spent way too much time hand painting those little the little scales and letting them dry when I could just use a permanent marker. Alcohol ink dries so very quickly. So once the brick is done, we can move to the final step in the project. That'll be step 12, attaching the wings and the horns. So earlier on I had mentioned I decided not to do the wings right away. I formed the wings and the horns out of clay. They are dry and I'm just about to paint them. And once I paint them, I'm going to use Loctite super glue to attach them to the overall project. So I've got the project here. It's ready to go. I'm not recommending super glue for this stage. We need something less flexible and definitely stronger. So the super glue will work perfect. I'm using a gel super glue to give myself a lot of control. This is such a project with curves that the runny super glue I thought would just make a mess. So I'm starting with the wing on the farther side. And then once that's dry, I'll go ahead and add the second wing. And then once that's in place and ready to go, I'll go ahead and then do the horns on the head. And that will wrap up the project. So there you have it. The project is complete. It looks spectacular. I just love how it turned out. The size is perfect. And I can't wait to craft a pavilion, a town square for it to sit on. So that'll be a future project that I'll do coming up here. So thanks for joining me at Black Cat Crafts. I love to do all sorts of projects, whether it's platforms, especially for people who are space challenged and need to build up rather than out. I also do some personalization projects as well, and occasionally some dupes like this one. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon.